So we're now going to actually invite Leanne Habib, Brendan Cleaver, and Nicole's been replaced by Brandon today to actually talk to us about how we actually would choose a strata manager and what some of the things that we need to actually be conscious of. So Leanne and Brendan and Nicole, Brandon, would you make yourselves known to us?
Hi, Samantha. It's Leanne. I'm online.
Hi, hi,
Can hear you,
hi. I
see
can
you.
hear you. And Brendan, and I know Brandon came in, so I'm sure he'll be joining us any minute.
Hi,
Um,
everyone.
so, what I wanted to quickly ask you was, a series of questions because at the moment, actually choosing a strata manager is like one of the toughest kind of gigs that people are very conscious of. Just talk to me quickly, Leanne. Like we just briefly touched on it about building managers and strata managers in your, and you've got both realms within your business, which is great. So there's a lot of continuity. But from your perspective, a strata manager, what are they tasked to do?
That could go on for hours, but I'll give you the short version,
Yeah,
which is
do
quite good
that.
actually.
Bullet point, please.
Look, I mean, very high level, strata managers are really administrating the overall administration of the owner's corporation, whereas a building manager for me are on site. They're the ears and eyes on site, ensuring bylaw compliance, suppliers, service of assets, and the building upkeep overall. The strata manager is getting involved in the financial management. It's getting involved in the decision making and the meetings. It also can get involved in the work and orders and maintenance. Even though you have a building manager, they're still getting involved because they've got to then facilitate the approvals when they have to go to meetings, having the right motions, giving leadership and guidance on what resolutions are needed for what type of alterations and repairs. And we're also there to enforce bylaws. So when a building manager might issue a first or second bylaw breach, it needs to be escalated. That's when the building manager gets involved. They are basically the authorised representative on behalf of the owners corporation. And I always have the hierarchy chart as the owners corporation, the strata committee, the strata manager, the building manager, and then your service suppliers. So, there's quite involved in our role as strata managers. And I often say that we aren't just, bookkeepers or just doing the administration, but we do need to be leaders, especially in the strata schemes that we have nowadays. They're no longer your simple walk-ups. They're a lot larger, more complex. So it's all about giving that leadership and guidance, and something that Brendan touched on in his talk earlier, where, you want strata managers to be able to guide these owners corporations through challenging times, but even just simple matters. You want to know, what do I do? This is a situation. Do I go left or right? Is it option A? Is it option B?
And I agree with you because, so many times I hear a strata manager say, I take direction from the OC committee, but you're there as someone, equipped and knowledgeable in that space to do the pros and cons with them for both choices and then actually get a decision. Like if you don't get a decision as a strata manager, that's kind of like passive aggressive to me. And I think, that's one of the things that you must be doing is making sure that if there's an issue or a situation that needs to be resolved, you're part of that solution process, right?
Absolutely. And that comes obviously from years of experience as strata managers. It wouldn't be the first time that we're dealing with, defects claim, or wouldn't be the first time we're dealing with a bylaw breach. So from years of experience, what happens on multiple sites, you will then give that guidance and that leadership. And there's nothing worse than a strata manager acting as a post box. And I know that a
Yeah.
lot of, managers do give that leadership, which is really important. And it's something that, our property commission has touched on in the past, where strata managers should be guiding the owners through the management. It could be simple issues, it could be major issues, but I think it's very important that leadership is demonstrated. But the client, being the principal, is the one that makes the decisions. How do they make a well-informed decision? They rely on the strata manager to well informing them and guiding them.
Perfect. Now, Brandon and Brendan, what's the most typical issues that you see or mistakes that OC committees or OCs make when they're appointing a strata manager?
I guess I might just elaborate a little bit more on what I was talking about in my previous segment I did with you. I think probably one of the most common issues is going for cheap strata management. They might be dissatisfied with their current manager and then they just go and get quotes based on pricing alone. So I think that's probably one of the most common pitfalls that I see. The other one is, I guess, having the wrong strata manager appointed with the new company, making sure that the particular strata manager that's proposed is suitable to the building and the needs of the owners corporation. And I guess probably another thing is also just only gravitating towards big brand strata, and I'm talking about large corporate strata, companies like Pika Group, I guess, and others that own multiple strata brands. There may be a perception that because they're large, they're a massive national company, that they may have the best solutions. It's not always the case, and there's all different styles of strata management companies out there. And I would always encourage strata committees and owners to consider, small companies, medium-sized boutique companies, and larger. And large can mean large and not corporate as well. So
Well, sometimes with large, you just become a number.
you
Brandon,
can.
so yeah, so obviously going with the cheapest price, and I always say, you pay for what you get, and thinking that sometimes a larger corporate is going to be a better fit. And as Brendan said, you get pitched by the business development manager, but then you end up with a junior. What are some of the other things that you're seeing happen that are the biggest mistakes that OC committees can make? You're muted, Brandon. You might have to unmute yourself, darling. There we go.
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you
Yes.
now.
Yeah, so I was switching from my headset earlier. Yeah, I very much agree with Brendan in regards to owners corporations or committees choosing the most cheapest proposal that they get or the lowest fee. That generally indicates that the manager that they'll be lumped with or in the portfolio tends to be quite a large portfolio, that they'll have quite a lot of clients within their portfolio to manage, which is also comes down to checking the portfolio size exactly. How many buildings or lots is your manager that is proposed to be looking after you? How much will they actually be managing? Because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that your manager's there when you need them the most, when things go wrong, and they're available to pick up the call and help you when you need them. So I think they're probably the most biggest pitfalls that we see when committees are looking to change, and then also what is included in the proposed agreements and what isn't included. That generally is missed. They just see the main management fee at the end of the day, but actually diving into those agreements and see what you're getting for the value that's being proposed and what you may be up for in terms of any additional things.
Very valid point, because we know that there's another schedule, right? And so suddenly you might have an escalation cost because you said no to the insurance commissions, but now they're handling an insurance kind of like program for you, or they're having to liaise on the building manager with defects. So just you're right, beware of the fine print. So Brandon, back to you again. When you're looking at a strata company as an OC, what should you be looking for? What's some of the things that you want to be aware of in terms of then qualifications or, those kinds of aspects?
For me, yeah.
Yes.
So in terms of each, when looking for a strata manager, I think it's very important to look at the type of property you are and what your requirements are, and align that with the company and your proposed manager to make sure that they do have the skill sets readily available to assist you with your property, and that they have adequate support as well. If sometimes clients have larger projects that they need streamlined and get underway without any delays. Make sure your manager has adequate support in place. If they're away, is there backup support? If there's emergencies and your manager's not available, what's their process in being able to assist you? So I think they're very important aspects to keep in mind.
I agree. So talking about their processes and systems for dealing with crisis, dealing with emergencies, because you're only as good as in a crisis, right? And if you have a crisis, you don't want to be waiting 24 hours or 48 hours for something to resolve. Leanne, churn of staff, is that something to be worried about if you're seeing, your strata management company and you've got a different strata manager every 8 weeks? Like, is that something that you should be talking about with your strata management company before you appoint them?
Look, definitely. And I think, a part of it, I mean, there's two reasons for the tune of staff. The one reason is we do have more more demand than supply. And that's obviously an issue across all industries, but it's always been an issue in Strata and something that we need to work on collectively. But the other reason I see it happen is because of their concept. They're all focused on very large portfolios, which then burns out that Strata manager, and then they just can't do it because it's like my analogy I've said multiple times. A childcare supervisor, you give them 100 kids, 80 kids, doesn't matter how great they are, they're not going to keep up with 80 or 100 kids. It's the same thing with Strata. You could be the best, most competent, capable Strata manager, but if you give a Strata manager, 60 buildings plus, even 50, with the scope that we're now required to do as managers, it becomes too much, and then they get burnt out with all the after hour meetings, and that's why you're getting a change of staff. So I think it's very important, as both Brendan and Brandon have said, to understand the concept and the company structure, what their size portfolio is and who's behind that badge, because that's really, really important. But yeah, I think it is a concern, because if you are seeing constant change of strata managers, you need to ask the question, why? Is it because they're having them do too much? Because generally a strata manager will stay if they're enjoying the role, one, as a strata manager, but two, if the company is supporting them, investing in their development and growth, and also making sure that the job they're giving them is possible. It's not impossible where they're setting them up to fail before they even start.
So, Brendan, from your perspective, because you've seen lots of strata management companies through your tender process, like what are the ones that you think are excelling? What are they doing best?
I think, just to reiterate on what Leanne was saying, I think the ones with more consistent staffing and not overloading their strata managers. I think the ones that are more open and transparent, they're sort of, I guess, effectively complying of the new world of strata that we're all living in and working in and having to manage now and deal with on a day-to-day basis. I think those companies are really setting those standards. They really shine if we're talking about a tender or a developer looking for the right strata manager. I think those companies, and there's said 300 plus. So I think there's a good group of people doing a good job, and I think they're the ones that generally tend to stand out
Yeah,
in
good.
most scenarios. But yeah, I think retention of staff, being able to deliver what they promise in their proposal is really important as well, and that the fee structure and alignment with the strata scheme works out long term. I've seen some cases where the strata management fee has been proposed, and then I'll get a call a year later from a client and say, look, they've charged us the same in schedule fees as they have for the management fee, and there wasn't much really going on in our building. So I guess consistency is the key as well. And just being approachable, being able to pick up the phone and talk to the owners and communicating. Those strata companies that are really doing that well, I think, are the ones that are really setting the benchmarks.
Well, and the problem you have is that, one bad strata manager experience, unfortunately, can sully the rest of the industry, right? And we've seen that with the fallout with some of the media as well. So if you're interviewing, obviously, we recommend that you should shortlist and interview strata managers. You would too, Brendan. What would be one of the questions that you would ask? And I'm going to ask the same of you, Brandon and Leanne. What's one question that you would make sure that's definitely on your question list when you're interviewing your shortlist?
I'd obviously be asking the intending strata manager proposed to provide some examples of similar buildings that they've managed to show that they are capable to manage the scheme in question. Going back to what Leanne said before about how many buildings they're currently managing, so then they're not going to be overloaded by taking over your 100-lot scheme. And how many similar buildings do they manage within their portfolio as well, I think is a really good question to bring up. And I guess another thing also with larger schemes, if that strata manager is not available or needs to take leave, that there is an alternative strata manager or assistant or a locum strata manager that can jump in, right? Because it does happen. I'm sure Leanne and Brandon know you can't manage to have everybody on deck on every single day. I think that support is really important.
Cool. Brandon, what would be your question that you would ask if you were sitting in the OC seat?
Yeah, again, back to what I said earlier, support structure. I think that's a very big thing in strata management. Your strata manager can't do everything. There's,
Mm.
the our role and scope is forever evolving. So having the necessary support structures in place, and also specialized team members if they do in their field, like insurance, accounting, to support their manager when those tricky questions do come up. So what kind of support structure? The technology that they use, how they communicate with owners, when they communicate with owners. So we have protocols in place for our office when emergencies happen, and how to communicate that to owners that may be affected within the building. And their management strategy, like how they would approach the onboarding, what would the first 90 days look like in the transition, and especially when they've got projects that are delayed, and we tend to see that a lot, that things have been put in the back burner because they didn't have confidence in previous management. How is that going to look like in the first 90 days, and get things back on track? So I think they're some good things to look out for.
Brandon, I love that because, of course, a lot of corporates, when they hire a new CEO, the first thing they want to do is know what you're going to do in the first 90 days, right, of your term in office, so to speak. And even politicians talk about the first 90 days. So I think it's really great that you actually say that. That's a great question. What's it going to look like from day 1 to day 90 with us engaging you in that transition? So that's perfect. Leanne, what would your question be?
Yes, so I would have a few, but one would be, and everything that, the guys have said, I totally agree with, but I'm a strong believer that it's to ask some case studies too, put some case studies to them, because everyone can say they can strata manage, everyone can say they have the expertise and the knowledge, but I say use some of the aches and pains that you as owners or committee members are facing with your current agent, or even just generally as an owners corporation, and put that case to that strata manager and see what advice they would give you, how they would navigate you through that problem, because then you're actually hearing firsthand the knowledge that they have, rather than just, seeing a paper proposal, hearing about, how great they are. I'm like, put them to the test on the spot and ask that question. And I say that because I act as a BMC rep for quite a few of our schemes where we're not the BMC manager, but then we have to go out to tender as a BMC for those services. And, Brendan's helped us on many occasions, and the BMCs ran a few of their own, but then we interview them and they look really good in paper. But then when you put them in front of you and you ask some of those tricky questions, that's when they buckle. So I think it's really good to ask those, difficult questions to see how they respond, because you want to be choosing someone that you can rely on and has the expertise and knowledge. The other thing I'd be looking at closely and asking is about the fee structure. I go back to what Brendan was saying, and both of them saying that they start very low, what I call a starting price, but it's not the end price. There's a lot of other add-on charges, and it is, for me, isn't as transparent as some of them that are providing an all-inclusive fee. We're one of them, but I just feel knowing what that price will entail. In other words, if they're giving you X dollars for a starting price, ask them what do they imagine, or what do they think that the likely cost will be? How many meetings do you think a scheme of our size would need? Now that you know the issues in our scheme, how many meetings, or, informal meetings, formal meetings, how much disbursements do you think we're likely to generate? That way you can get more of an accurate feel on what the overall fees for them would be to manage your scheme. I think that's really important, because I see a lot of owners corporations get sucked in thinking that it's a lower fee. But in fact, as you said, Brendan, the Schedule Bs end up outweighing the base fee if they're proactive, and sometimes, end up being the same.
I agree. It's a bit like going into a display suite for a house and land, right? And they give you a price and you say, well, how much would it cost me to get it look like this? And it's always like an extra 50,000. So, you need to be buyer beware in that situation. So in terms of then what should be, like, what's some of the kind of like red flags in a contract that you should be looking out for. And one of the first red flags I always look for is like the renewal, right? So it's a 1+1+2 or whatever, or they actually have a clause in the contract which states that the strata manager can actually renew the contract and the owners have got no say in it. So, what's some of the things that you should be looking out for in those contracts?
Yeah, I agree. You definitely don't want rolling over clauses. We see them often, not just in strata managing agent contracts, even in lift renewal contracts. So no rolling over automatic, which is not permitted by law, but you just want to ensure it's not there. You want to ensure that, the annual increases are fair, either in line with CPI or as agreed. You want to ensure it's very, very detailed or clear on what services you are receiving for the base fee versus what are the additional services. And if they are additional services, what that fee would be. And you want to make sure that it's captured all the services that you need. I've seen sometimes some agreements are saying, A, B, and C will be included, but really they need X, Y, Z, and it hasn't been allowed for in the base fee or an agreed service. And then when they do need it, you're getting some managers that are charging them additional for it, but then there's no allowance in that agreement to charge for it. And I potentially think Fair Trading might be looking at some of those cases at the moment where, and I think, Sam, you've had a few too, where owners are saying they've charged me for X, but the agreement doesn't actually permit them to charge me for that. So I think it's really important to look at those closely.
Brandon, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with what Leanne said. Most of those items, and we're seeing a lot in agreements that people are putting like a minimum 4 hours or 6 hours worth of work for some items that may only take 1 or 2 hours or even 15 minutes to complete. So those kinds of charging mechanisms or structures are a bit not very transparent, because it doesn't, if you are on a base fee plus Schedule B model, it's not really a true reflection of how much additional work is being done for your property and can add up quite quickly. So that's a thing to look out for in terms of those contracts.
Excellent. Brendan?
Sam, I was just going to say on the schedule fee, something that I've seen quite regularly is the lack of ability to disclose some strata companies on how they report their schedule fees or how they advise the Owners Corporation Strata Committee where they're going to trigger a schedule fee, or the lack of detail. So it might be a $5,000 fee for additional meetings, and then the committee, the owners have no way of discerning how that was charged. It's just a flat fee. So I think full disclosure and notification to the owners when a scheduled fee is going to be incurred, so they're aware, and that's not a surprise. I was just going to go back to things that you should look for, and I was just going to recommend also that if running a tender or you're just looking for an agent, potentially an exit clause to be included, because I think if the strata company can back themselves and be confident they're going to do a good job, there should be no reason. Say, for example, if it's a 2 or 3 year agreement, they may be open to including an exit clause or a key person clause for the strata manager that's put forward, where the strata company is given the first right of option to replace the strata manager if they're leaving. And if that can't be provided, then the owners corporation potentially has an option to get out of that contract.
And I think that's really important because we often see very unsatisfied, customers with their strata manager, and their strata manager says, "Well, fine, pay us out the $100,000. That's the exit fee, and then we'll go." And of course, by this point, the strata manager, the OC and the committee are saying, "Why should we have to do that?" And then basically it's just a marriage of two very unhappy people and it just does not get better. So, at the end of the day, like you say, if you feel like you're delivering a good service, why have you got an exit clause in there of that? And I understand protection, but at the end of the day, 3 months notice is usually enough, right, for the kind of like exit and then the payout. But when you're actually holding a strata, or holding an OC over a barrel as the strata manager, it doesn't do you any good. And certainly bad mouth, you don't want that kind of negative publicity out there at all. So
Can I
from
just
our,
add to that? Sorry,
yes,
Sam, can I
please
just add
do.
to that? So we offer what we call a 6-month trial period and sometimes 12 months where it's the get out of jail card. You know, if you feel we're not for you, we're not
Yes,
delivering, you can
yes,
get out of that. I think going back to the contract term, I think one thing that should be noted as strata managers, we don't sell anything tangible. So our assets are those contracts. And I
yes.
think if that manager is delivering, then a contract after that initial trial period is worthy because it's got to be obviously a two-way where you're supporting that manager for doing good and that strata manager is obviously supporting that owner's corporation. To tie contracts sometimes to an individual is a bit difficult and not necessarily, in my view, commercial because we all have employees that come and go for various reasons. Sometimes it could be, health reasons, family reasons. So it's very difficult to be able to have contracts based on individuals. You are contracting with that entity, and I think that contract should be selected on that entity rather than the individual. But having that initial period, you're going to know if that company is right for you because the individual is as good as the processes and procedures that back them. The
Correct.
individual is as good as that company and management team backing them and the leader. So my advice is always look at who's behind the badge. Everyone has a badge. It's understanding who's behind it, who are the leaders, and how they operate overall.
I agree, and certainly it's important to understand any conflicts of interest. We don't want to see a situation which we have seen in some contracts where the OC and the committee are tied to just one broker, and hence, then the insurance quotes that come in are usually not competitive. So it's important that you have that flexibility to exercise your rights while still working in partnership with your strata management company, right? So
Yep, absolutely. That's the principle.
that's the principle.
Yep.
So
Yep.
we're 3 minutes from winding up. Last quick question: should you do regular performance reviews with your strata manager, Brendan? What do you think?
Yeah, I think you should do that. I think you should be setting KPIs that are realistic as well, so you can benchmark them. It's got to be fair for both sides of the agreement. So I think regular reviews, if it's a 3-year agreement, 2-year agreement, at least once every year. If it's a 1-year agreement, obviously you're going to review it every year. I think it's healthy, and I think it helps both parties to communicate better together and a greater opportunity for success if you're talking regularly about the issues
I
and
agree.
concerns.
Brandon, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think just have if regular performance of your manager is necessary, especially if you see if service levels have dropped. But at the end of the day, you're partners and you're working together. So just like with any relationship with any staff member, if there are things slipping through the crack, have an open and honest conversation with them. They're not, it's not a them versus us mentality. We're here to work together. So, and if that doesn't work, if things don't improve, then you can escalate it to a more senior management if your company has that pathway. But yeah, I think regular performance is necessary, especially if they aren't living up to your expectation.
Cool. Leanne, your thoughts?
Absolutely. And it's something that we do. We call them temperature check-ins that we do with the clients. We've just done an annual owner survey as well, because I'm a big believer you can't fix something that you don't know
Yeah.
is wrong. So I think it's important we encourage both positive, negative, big or small feedback. And I think doing it more regularly is important. It doesn't have to be a formal process, but it could just be having a catch up and saying, look, this is working really well. We feel that, accounts might be a little bit slow in getting paid. We feel that the levies aren't coming out on time. Because for me, it's giving feedback, giving them an opportunity. No difference to, if I bring a cleaner to the house, I have to give them feedback. This is really great, but can you focus more on these areas? And if you feel you're giving the feedback, but it's falling on deaf ears or there's no improvement, then absolutely escalate. And then even if you've escalated, you feel it's still not improving, that's when then you should then be looking at alternates. And, that's no different to any service provider. I think it's only fair that you give them an opportunity to fix the issue, improve, and if they can't, then it's only fair that you move on.
Fair call. All right. Thank you, the three of you. That has been a very insightful discussion. I'm just checking to see if there are any questions at all. Not at this point. Is there any questions from the floor in regards to choosing a strata manager? Put your hand up or pop it in the chat. Peter, go ahead. You're muted, Peter, and you're also cameras
Oh,
off.
thank. Oh, here we go. Sorry. Am I there?
You,
I'm there.
you
Yes,
are.
got it. Hi, thank you all. Very insightful. So thanks for the conversation. Just in regards to Strata Manager, is it can a Strata Manager or can a Strata Management company sell the entity and then you're left with whoever that entity is passed on to?
They can
Yes.
sell the entity, they just can't assign the management without your resolution. So if they are buying ABC Strata, you're
Yes.
contracted to ABC Strata. They inherit ABC Strata, including its assets and liabilities. So they get the good and the bad with that brand. But they can't assign your contract from ABC Strata to XYZ Strata, for example. They would need a resolution by the Owners Corporation at a general meeting
Right.
to assign the contract rights to another entity.
Yeah, okay. All right.
So it's usually through a novated contract. So we have seen it where the outgoing strata management company writes to the OC committee and advises that they have sold the business, and that the new business is requesting that you actually sign a contract, basically an ongoing contract with them. That can be dealt with as a get out of jail free card if you're not happy with your strata manager. Am I right in that process?
Only if you're not contracted with the first entity that sold. So if the first entity has the 3-year agreement, that contract remains on foot.
That's right.
But if you want to, like you said, navigate from ABC to XYZ Strata, then you need a general meeting resolution and you need your consent. If you're out of contract, well, you can choose to leave or re-sign with the new entity.
Yeah, okay. No, thank you.
Brandon, were you going to say something?
I think it very much depends on the contract that you have. Some do have transfer agreements in there where you can transfer the agreement over to another company that if they haven't purchased the actual entity. So it very much depends on the agreement that you have.
Depends whether it's a whole of asset sale or just a shared transfer of assets as well.
There you go. All
Yeah.
But
right.
even if you've got the assignee, my understanding is you still need the general meeting resolution. So legally, you could have, if you've got it, legally, you can't just transfer it without the consent of the principal. And it makes sense, yeah, because me as a consumer, I've chosen Strata Manager 1. I didn't choose Strata Manager 2. So why would I be
Correct.
forced to take Strata Manager 2 unless the asset's being bought in full?
Correct. Correct. All right, lovely. Well, we're going to call it quits there. Thank you very much, Brendan, Brandon, and Leanne, and for your insights. We appreciate that. And certainly, if any of you want to get in touch with any of our speakers, please let me know, and we'll make that possible.